Get rich fast with csgofast.com.
So we're here at ECS Season 1 Finals Day 2. Now you're going to have a little bit of time before you actually get to cast. You have the other two games, so we kind of wanted to sit down, talk about a little bit more about the details of the casting, not really about like how you got in there and all that stuff. I think that's been talked about quite a lot enough. So yeah, let's get into ECS at first. What do you see as the biggest storylines going into the event before actually seeing the results?
The thing is, I don't think there's one big storyline for the season. I think there's a lot of little ones. And I guess it depends on where your interests lie. If you're European, I would say that the rise of G2, qualifying for this event, they had a really good Pro League finals. Here, okay, they got knocked down by Liquid early on. I think they were a little bit... I don't think they were prepared fully for the Liquid. I don't think there was a way to prepare for the Liquid that came in with JDM and Simple. But obviously they handled NIP quite well, and now they have the rematch. So I think that'll be interesting to watch. I think Fnatic qualifying without Olaf, and now he's back. That's obviously everyone's focusing on that. He was back for E-League. Here they go through the group unbeaten. I wouldn't say it was the best group stage that we've seen from them. It certainly isn't Fnatic of old yet. The scores were close against two games that you would have thought would have been easier.
It was CLG and TSM, wasn't it?
Exactly, two North American teams, and they were both close games. And I think that the signs are there that they're going to come back. And they'll take off where they were, but it's just going to take some growing pain. And I think they were a little bit, and I think Dennis actually said it in an interview with Sue yesterday, that they were kind of overextending a little bit at times. So I'm still going to be a little bit skeptical, but that's a storyline, undoubtedly. And then in the North American side of things, throughout the whole season, one of the issues was roster instability and constant shuffling around, and a lot of that had to do with rosters being entered into the E-League and not fielding five. So everyone was jumping around and trying to find a home, and organizers were throwing money around to try and get players. And TSM, I think, is one that you have to look at for that reason. And even them in E-League couldn't play with Twist because of his age. Here he's on deck, and him and Sick, I think, have been awesome. Yeah. And their rise in the last 2 weeks as a team and finally getting some structure, I think, has been really cool to watch. So that's a big story. And then obviously in the LAN itself, not so much in the season, looking at Liquid with the roster they have.
So do you see any of the results as surprises? Obviously TSM defeating Astralis, I think it was in the first round, and then Liquid beating G2. Do you see those as surprises, or do you kind of tie it down to like the best of ones?
I don't think I tie it down to the best of ones, because TSM also played very well against Fnatic. That one, I think, is the surprise of the tournament so far, is how well they're doing, and again, that roster, how much they've improved, because they were a bit of a laugh even during the regular season at times. Henry was blowing his mind out just like watching them play at times because they had no structure. So it's really good to see them improving. I think that the Liquid one's a little bit more I guess expected in a way. Again, you can't really strat against them. We know Simple's explosive. We know JDM's consistent. And the other three on that team have always been great. So G2's a little bit inconsistent still at times. They aren't great against teams they don't know. So that one I think was a little bit less surprising. But TSM I think is very impressive.
So now looking at, in a week we're going to have Cologne coming up really. And how do you see that both affecting this event? Maybe like in terms of preparation, people are probably going to come back from this event to prepare like a boot camp or something, and how this event will actually say about what's coming up in Cologne.
I think a lot of the teams are actually staying over to boot camp as well to avoid jet lag and whatnot. I don't buy into the saving strats thing. I'm just going to say that right off the bat. I don't buy into that philosophy at all. You might save like one boost here or there, but not a tactic, not a default. That's a very situational thing, and maybe you don't want to show it, and it may not work anyway. But saving a strat, no, that doesn't. I don't buy into that. So this is very much a boot camp for some of these teams, and I think the team that's going to be most concerned is NIP. They didn't win DreamHack Summer against Immortals, who aren't at the major. And I know they weren't fussed so much about winning DreamHack Summer as much as they were playing as a team and making sure that they were improving and working on, tight discipline that threat spots them. And I think they were a little bit disappointed with their final performance, especially GetRight was very disappointed with his individual performance. And now in this tournament, they're out. They're already gone. And that's going to start. They're a team that obviously Malmo was huge. They've been building. They've been improving. And they're running with momentum. Now that momentum's been killed right before the major, and that might start to cast some doubt on them. And I hope it doesn't psychologically play with them a little bit, because if they play their game, look, they made it out of groups without Pith last time, with Threat playing. That's impressive. They kept their top 8 spot. This event, I think there's a chance they'll do the same, and there's a chance they could go much further how they've been playing, but they need to make sure that over the next week they really focus in on things. And I think part of this as well is coming into this, they were trying to expand their map pool. much like Astralis was and still is. And I'm not sure there's time for that anymore. So tighten up on the maps and hope that you have a good ban process.
So do you think, I mean, you've already touched on it a little bit. Get Right was kind of disappointing in his DreamHack performance, and this time he actually played even worse. I think this time his and Forest were their worst performances ever in CS:GO. Yeah. So like, do you think that's like the main issue, just those two not really showing up, or is this just like a big team issue?
I think it's definitely an issue if those two don't show up. There is some team concern. They didn't play anti-ecos as well as they normally do in this tournament. They're a little bit aggressive at times when Threat's normally very good at keeping them slow and playing a very strategic start of the round. They tend to explode a little bit later on because they have that skill. But I think that to touch on the two of them, Get Right's style of play can be countered. It is a lurk. He's a bit more loose. There's ways to counter it. But Forest is the key to the team, in my opinion. If Forest isn't on, like if you look at the history of their recent results, if Forest isn't on, then that's when they don't have the success. I really do think that him being off this tournament was a bigger issue for them than Get Right itself. Get Right seems to rise to the occasion when the team does, but when Forest is off, no one really has the ability to take the ropes.
All right, so I think that's pretty much it in terms of ECS. I wanted to get into the casting as well, a little bit more details. You obviously are known to have kind of a more casual approach. Are there any events where you think you've gone too ham, where you think we've stepped over the line here?
Yeah, pretty much every event. I think. Well, look. I mean, we try and gauge it. So when it's a less serious event, look. Like for a major example, we've never been off the rails in a major. I think we've been pretty tight and narrow. There's a few jokes here and there, but I think that's appropriate at times to throw in one or two jokes. But like, I think the one that comes to mind for everyone is the HTC 1v1. It's extremely hard to cast 1v1s, let's just say that. Yeah. So how do you make it 1v1 exciting? I think banter has to be part of that. Did we go too far? Organizers seem to like it, and a lot of people seem to like it, but there's also a lot of people that didn't. So I think it's definitely, there's an argument to be made that we probably did. But I think overall, our style, like again, we gauge it out, minors and stuff, we have fun. I think the problem is that we were doing so many events that people just kind of get sick of it after a while. And I said this yesterday as well to someone that too much of anything is a bad thing. Even if it's the best thing in the world, you can eventually get tired of it. I think the same thing happened with us, just casting. Like we were on camera like 50 out of 60 days between the start of April and the end of May. That's a lot when you think about it, and that's not including travel days. So that's, when you come in every day and you look at a team and you go, oh, that was clever, and then you go, oh, why is he still doing that? And then going, why are you still doing that? Like you just get so sick of it, and you kind of lose that charm that you have. And the same can be said for the audience looking at us. If our humor is funny, eventually it gets old, right? And I think that part of the break was to reset our minds, to let everyone get a break, a breath of fresh air without us, and come back and be a little bit more serious. And I think that the jokes will be calculated from now on, but I don't think we'll be quite as ham as we used to be.
All right. So do you think that's kind of the casual style and kind of being able to work off of each other is what makes you guys so good together, you and Henry?
Yeah, I mean totally. I mean. That definitely is our charm. That is our way of working. And like I said, maybe we've gone too far, but we don't want to lose it entirely, because I think that loose kind of joking around, the bromance everyone brings up, I think that it's definitely what makes us good together and makes that chemistry, because we're not scared to take jabs at each other, but we're also not scared to tell each other the truth. Like Henry's far more analytical than I will, and one of the things that I've done as a caster and working with him is he's definitely taught me a lot more about the game, but I used to just avoid any analytical parts at all. I would just stick to the excitement, stick to the hype. Now what I'll try and do is I'll try and lead into a little bit of analyticals just to cue up a conversation for him, and I'm not scared of being wrong, and he's not scared of telling me when I'm wrong. And sometimes that's a really good thing, because then he can build on it and explain why it's wrong, rather than just say what was good or what was bad or what he didn't like. He can start to talk more about the theory and philosophy of the game. And
it's like a conversation too.
Totally, and I think that's why, I think it's in that sense we're oil and water in our styles, but it mixes really well, if that makes any sense. Chemistry doesn't work that way, but I think that it makes for a really dynamic duo.
All right, so outside of casting, you've obviously the two toes in the water of desk hosting. Do you miss it?
Not really. Part of that was out of necessity. At the start of the year, there wasn't really, due to Machine's alliances with ESL, now the MTG things kind of changed that. He couldn't really do the DreamHacks, and obviously DreamHack had a falling out with Richard Lewis. There was a void. And they kind of approached me, and it was talked about, and Henry and I had to talk about it if it was, breaking up the duo a little bit, and he was comfortable with that, and who would he work with. And I really do like it, and I do want to host at some point in my career. I think if I ever get sick of casting or if CS dies, it's nice to have that skill because I can still kind of transfer into another esport or, maybe a show role or something like that. Like if there's an esports, ESPN style show, like a coverage show. So I think it's an important skill to have, and I did enjoy doing it, and I think that I improved each time that I did it, which is important, but casting's still my main focus, and it's really good to have Machine into the DreamHacks because he does an excellent job, and it broadens our talent lineup as well, which gives us more depth to work with.
Mm-hmm. So you've obviously been into a lot of events under a lot of different organizers. Every one of them has a little bit of a different system in terms of how they use talent, how they kind of swap around. Do you think... Is there a comfortable system that you kind of prefer, or is there just like do those different events have like different pluses and I guess negatives?
I think that everyone's been improving. There used to be some events that it was like a little bit more rigid and talent wasn't treated the same as at other events, but now that we've all kind of worked together as a team, and I think everyone who watches CS notices there is a fairly regular talent lineup in most of the tournaments, so guys like Anderson Semler, myself and Henry, James and DDK, Richard Lewis Thor, and those guys, they're all, we're always around, and a lot of the desk guys, I'm not gonna name everyone, but because we're always working together and we're seeing the same issues, we've come to the organizers and tried to fix it, so now we do have, green rooms with, decently healthy food on hand instead of eating pizza every 5 minutes. We have someone on talent that if we have an issue, they can fix it for us. It's gotten to the point at times where they'll even like clean our clothes for us, which is great. I don't know that that's necessary all the time, but it's nice that they're looking at that. I mean, that's more of a TV look on things. But at the start of things, yeah, I mean, it was a little bit scattered. DreamHacks were a little loose. There was not as much structure. You kind of rotated with talent. ESL kind of had their thing going on where their talent in-house kind of mixed in with others, so we didn't always work with our duos. We're trying to get away from that. We're trying to stick with our duos because it's better for the viewers, it's better for us, it's just easier to work. We've got more chemistry. So PGL obviously as well is a little bit different because they stick with a core group. It's a very small talent lineup usually, so myself and Henry end up casting all the games, which is exhausting, but it's kind of nice because we're involved in all of it. We see all the games, we kind of keep up to date. It's very easy, I'm not going to lie, when you're not casting to be watching a game but not be invested into it as much because you're kind of relaxing at the same time. So you don't pick up on all the fine details that might be a storyline building into the tournament. And if you're watching everything, you can kind of be more, I guess, a narrator as much as a commentator because you know what's happened in the previous games. You can use that data to help this and help build that story. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of an interesting, it's kind of a loose question because like I can interpret that many different ways. But in terms of working with organizers, they definitely all have their own systems, but they're all getting much better at making sure treatment is equal, and we're quite good at communicating between them what needs to be fixed. So talkbacks, mute keys, communication with the producer, making sure we've got water when we need it. If there's an issue, we have someone that's close to us while we're casting that we can wave to if there's no communication on the mic, and they'll come fix things. And so yeah, I mean, everyone's pretty good in that sense now.
So what about grouping up the matches for the casters? Obviously, before we had kind of a one game pause, one game analysis, one game casting, one game analysis. What do you think about the grouping now that we've kind of seen it in use? I think it was a DreamHack and now here as well.
I think it's great. One of the issues is the downtime. From a personal standpoint, when you do one game on, one game on, one game off, one game on, you have to be here all day. And the downtime drives me nuts on a personal level. I've never been one person just sit and do one thing. Like, it feels very pigeonholed to me. I've always been like the kind of guy to do 3 different sports in a day or 3 different activities in a day. So that's why part of the break came about too, because I was just getting worn out in that sense. So by having this grouping system, it's much better in a lot of ways for me because I can, if I'm not working the mornings, I can sleep in maybe, feel more rested. Or if I'm not working the afternoon, I can take off and go hang out with some of the guys or, go for a run, go to the gym, whatever. It's also nice because, and this, I think everyone would agree on this, and this is why we're doing it, you get into it more. Yeah. Sometimes if you're doing a best of one and you're swapping every time, it's hard to really build into it. You do one game and it's done, whereas the hype's gone. And then it's kind of fragmented in that sense. Whereas if you're doing multiple games, you can really start to feel out the atmosphere, you can feel out the audience, you can get a feel for the games in general, and your chemistry builds. Because when you start your first game of the day, your first couple rounds, sometimes you come out of the gate flying and it's perfect, but usually you trip over your co-commentator a few times, you're just, you're not fully on it yet. It's like a warm-up in any sport, right? So in that sense, I think it's better for the excitement levels as well. So I think it's overall a much better schedule to do that.
All right. Now we've seen a lot of this swapping in between kind of casting and analysis. Do you feel like there's a lack of pure analysts because we only basically see Thorn and YNK and sometimes Vendetta, but that's pretty much it in terms of pure analysts?
Yeah, the weird one is the analyst role right now. Casters, obviously, we've gotten into duos and we've been pushing more to work with our duos, but the rotations aren't always ideal. Like, occasionally I'll go onto the analyst desk and I can talk about a storyline or I can talk about a player history, but I can't really break down the game on the same level that a guy like YNK can, right? So I think there's a lot of players out there that are kind of dabbling in and out. Like when Sean Gares wasn't playing on Echo Fox after Cloud9, everyone thought, oh, he can go on the desk, he did a Pro League, Sponge maybe now, but it is a little bit more inconsistent in that sense. So I think there's still spaces available for those who want to make it a full-time thing. Not2 is another one that comes in and out from time to time, but he does a lot of commentary stuff in Finnish in Finland, and he has other obligations. So I think you're right. I think that there needs to be a more consistent desk to make sure that, and I mean, to go back to our point about casting as well, working in duos, if they have a set team on the desk, they build chemistry as well, and they know how to play off of each other, and they know when, like there's little subtleties when people are talking. Like Henry knows usually on what octave. Like if I'm raising my voice, I'm probably going to end the sentence, as opposed I don't tend to trail off in a low tone, so he'll wait till I bring it back up, and then he knows, all right, I can jump in, right? If you learn that about other people, it just makes the conversation flow much better. So that kind of thing on a desk is important, and I think for ex-players, that's kind of the role that I think they should jump into, someone with a lot of game experience, and it seems like we're getting to the point where there's going to be some roster shuffle. Some of these guys are getting older, and it's available to them, so hopefully that's the roles that become filled, I think.
Now, organizers often prefer hiring duos, like locked-in duos, as opposed to solo casters. Do you feel like you've had an easier time kind of getting into the inner circle, starting with Henry G almost from the start? Do you feel like you had an easier time? And second of all, do you feel like it's hard for solo casters to get into it?
Henry kind of came in after I was already known, but because first of all, my rise has to do as much with the growth of CS and the timing of it. I was in the right place, right time. X Games was sort of the start of the boom in 2015. There wasn't really, I mean, Corey Dunn did a little bit, but wasn't full time with it. There wasn't really a North American caster that was I guess, going to all these events and had a European presence. And because I did a good job at X Games, people kind of started pushing me. But you're right, it wasn't until I got together with Henry, and I made a video just before we actually paired up about wanting a duo, because that's when you can start to expand. You learn off your casting partner, all the reasons I already mentioned, the chemistry, you just become much better. And I think now the duos are the way to go for that reason. And I think as a solo caster, you can still, talent is talent. Look, if you're good, you're good. You're going to get noticed at some point, but it may only take you so far. Someone like Metis, someone like Blue, who doesn't have a consistent partner, it is difficult, and you tend to be, and because of this, you tend to be, if you're hired for an event, the outside man at the event. You know, when they're scheduling, they fit you in where you can, and it happened to me a little bit a few times in events. And I guess there's nothing wrong with it, but to take the next step, it is best if you have a team, you have a duo, you can brand yourself, you can market yourself, people get to know you more, they know what to expect, and organizers take note of that. So it is difficult if you're solo.
Sure. So you've already mentioned Vince, Metis, and Blue. Are there any other casters that stand out, solo casters?
Right now, they're the two that are, like, inevitably there's going to be more space. There's a couple Australian guys that are quite good. There's another couple North Americans that have done decent work. I mean, Launders and Helium. I didn't really mention them because they kind of are a duo. Sure. But they've been doing good work and taking good strides forward. I think that, like I said, there's just so much expansion this year. Last year, we had weekends off. You know, there was weekends without tournaments. I think Anders did 25 events last year, and Anders and Semler did 25 events, which, well, you'd say that's a lot, and it was. This year, I've already done 17, and I think everyone's about that level. And the point is, last year, that was maxed out. This year, like, I never had a scheduling conflict last year. This year, there was one weekend I had to be in 3 places at once. There was another weekend where I was supposed to be in Austin. I had to go to Korea. Because of that, there is space available. So there's going to be more and more casters rising up. Dust Moret made a good reappearance at E-League. And like I said, the 4 I already mentioned. And in terms of who's making strides, I think those are the obvious ones. I obviously didn't mention Pansy at ESL and Machine, but those are the guys. Exactly, they've been around, and ESL's got their own system. But in terms of, I mean, yeah, I always say with new talent, people always ask me, how can I get involved? Make a demo, study the people you like, maybe compare yourself to them a little bit, maybe cast. I guess I'll go full into it. If you know that there's been a pro game you haven't seen and you want to be a caster, you have not seen the Twitch VOD, download the demo first, cast it yourself, compare yourself to how they did, and then you can kind of make notes. That's the best way to do self-feedback, and I've done it a few times as well back when I was starting out. And then from there, you just got to get into the community. Look for ESCA main games, get Reddit behind you. Look for feedback. Be open to constructive criticism. I mean, you're going to get a lot of trolls too, but be open to constructive criticism and make your name known and start really being humble and modest about it, and you'll get in. I mean, it's inevitable right now. There is a need for casters. So.
Sure. I think that's pretty much it, actually. Do you have any last words, any shout-outs or anything?
No, I will say, I've got to tell the story. I'm glad we finally, you know what I'm going with on this. Yeah. So last year, when I first went to Romania, you guys came over to me with the camera gear, the mic in hand, and I thought, oh, I've definitely made it now. HLTV is going to interview me. And then you said, where's Toby 1? And that was like the last time we talked. So it's good to finally do an interview with you guys. It's awesome. So thanks a lot.
I actually felt bad for that. It actually made me feel bad. All right. Thanks very much again.
No worries.